Alcohol makes sex a little bit more fun.
Did you just put the ring on, or are you in the first few years of your marriage? Welcome to the First Year Marriage Show, the podcast dedicated to helping newlyweds navigate the first few years of marriage. My husband, Marcus, and I will be sharing marriage tips to help you build a strong foundation for your marriage. We believe having a strong foundation is essential to having a happy, healthy, and lasting marriage. We will also be learning from the experiences of awesome married couples who have been where you are today, taking from them lessons to help you build a strong foundation for the lasting marriage you desire. Take a deep breath, relax, learn, and enjoy the show. Welcome to the First Year Marriage Podcast. Wow, I can't believe it that this episode is the 30th episode for this podcast. We want to thank you, our listeners, and all our wonderful guests who have shared their first year marriage experience and have made this show what it is. If you have any suggestions on how to improve this podcast, please share them with us. Our contact email is firstyearmarriage@gmail.com. For this week's episode, we also recorded a bonus session where Marcus talks about sexual challenges with our guest, Alex Barker. To get access to this bonus episode, visit the show notes, which can be found at firstyearmarriage.com/30. Have a wonderful week and enjoy this week's story.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the First Year Marriage Show podcast. I am your host, Marcus Kusi, and our guest for this week is Alex Barker from Michigan. Alex has been married for 5 years, and he has 2 children. He's a pharmacist by profession, an online business coach part-time, and also the former host of the well-known Leadership Dojo podcast. Listeners, I just wanted to give a quick thank you to Alex, because when we were starting out with our podcast, he was one of the guys that we spoke to and we sought advice about how to start a podcast, and he gave us a lot of insights and inputs into making this podcast great so that we'll be able to impact or reach a lot of couples who really need what we have to share with the podcast. So Alex, thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for helping us getting this podcast started.
Marcus, thank you. That's a really generous thing to say. I'm blushing on this side of the mic. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I'm glad that you launched it and it's doing as well as it is.
Let's dive into your first year right away. What is one or two things about your wife that when you met her, it really got you attracted to her, that you're like, okay, she's the one you want to get married to?
So we're talking about when we first, our eyes first met each other, right?
Yeah, when you first.
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. She was pretty hot, so I was like, "Oh man, that's a pretty girl." And I'll be honest. For all the guys that are out there, I'm one of the guys who wasn't that good looking. And in my opinion, I'm not one of the really handsome guys. I don't have tons of muscles. I'm pretty gangly. About the only thing going for me is that I can make fun of myself pretty well in a crowd, and I can make people laugh. And so I really tried to make that girl laugh. Her name's Megan. And I guess that's how I fooled her into marrying me. But she definitely has a lot more qualities than being pretty. Let me back up here. But what really attracted me to her was her humble attitude. That's really the most sexiest thing I think about her, is how humble she is. And I say that because I'm not a humble person. I'm very prideful. I'm very full of myself naturally. I'm a single child, so that compounds the problem even worse. I am naturally bent towards only thinking about myself, and that's a major problem that I have. And Megan loves me for who I am. She's the exact opposite of who I am, and I just naturally was drawn towards it. And thank God that just being a part of her life has made me so much more humble myself. It's made me realize how much I need to be thinking about other people rather than about myself. She is the woman who makes me a better man. And I knew from just hanging out with her a few times that this is the kind of girl that I need to marry. I was interested in marriage when we first started seeing each other, and I told her that, and she was on board for it. So I was like, yes, this is awesome. So to wrap up that question, I was attracted to her. I mean, by her looks, that's what caught my attention. She was very, very attractive, and I was shooting for the moon in comparison to my own looks. And just her real humble demeanor about how kind and empathetic she was. Again, the exact opposite of what I am. I mean, this is the honest truth, Marcus. When I started dating her, all of our mutual friends that were girls would tell my wife, Megan, he is such a nicer person now that you're dating him. I was a jerk back in the day, but not anymore. That's what a good woman does to you.
Yeah. So opposites attract, and in this case, it's been for a really, really good reason. And by just being in a relationship with Megan, you've been able to improve a lot that other people are able to testify or say good things about you that, you know, because of her coming to your life, now you're able to improve yourself and you're a whole lot better than you used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that.
So looking back at your first year, I know you guys have been married for over 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
How will you describe that first year in 1 or 2 words, looking at everything that went on, from the adjustments that you guys had to go through and the transitions that you personally had to make to your own lifestyle?
2 words, Marcus.
Or probably one.
one word?
Yeah.
All right. I'll give you 1 word, but it's going to have a hyphen.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Challenging reward. Okay. And I say that, you want me to explain that, or do you just want me that to be my answer?
I'm pretty sure our listeners will be interested in knowing what that means.
So we were married in the winter of 2010. And that winter, it was our Christmas break in college. And we got married during the most difficult semesters in both of our programs. I was trained to be a pharmacist. She was trained in video and television digital media. And I had some extremely difficult classes. I mean, classes that caused me to stay up until 12 or 3 in the morning just to prepare for a test. And Megan was gone constantly for video shoots and directing shows and all this stuff. And on top of our hard classes, I also had 2 part-time jobs. She had a job. And we also had to figure out this thing called marriage. That was very, very difficult. When you're a single child like me, you have a complex, and it's very hard to think outside of yourself. And I really grinded my wife's gears. I mean, I really pushed her to the limits with the things that I did. And she pushed my buttons because I'd never have lived with a woman before. And I just didn't get it half the time. I didn't get a lot of things. It was very challenging to figure out how to live with a woman. I've never really done it. And honestly, my mom is not a very emotional person. And my mom is very logical. And so this was the first time I've ever lived with a woman. And she's extremely emotional. I can't figure it out. It was very challenging. That was the first 5 months of our marriage. And then we, once the semester was over, we moved to another town to both go through our internships. And that's when things started to get really rewarding. We started to figure out our groove. We started to figure out how to communicate better, how to have fun together and relax together. We started to just really, really enjoy our marriage at that point. We started to realize that there were common themes with our arguments, our fights, and we honestly kind of just figured out how to calm each other down whenever we're getting super mad or we want to argue or fight. And it's been a well-oiled machine ever since.
Well, it looks like you guys had a lot of challenges going through the first year alone. And with the challenges that you guys had, do you want to share one specific challenge that you guys had that you think our listeners will benefit from, and how you were able to resolve it?
Picking one. Marcus, you're killing me. One challenge. I mean, there's the simple ones like I would leave cupboard doors open, and my wife would go crazy because all the drawers were open in kitchens. That's an easy fix, though. I had a problem with figuring out why my wife was so emotional about things. Like, logically, my brain said, logically, you should not be this emotional about this problem. And I realized two things. Whenever and to the listener, realize that most of these fights were my fault. It's not because my wife's emotional that we're having this fight. It's usually because I was being a turd nugget, okay? I found that two key principles. Number one is something a mentor called the judgment of charity. And it's an old Puritan term that really means that whenever you're dealing with someone, whether it's your spouse or not, you should assume that whatever is communicated from that person is not meant out of hatred or malice. The judgment of charity assumes that whoever this person is loves you. I understand strangers, that's probably not true, but for your spouse, it should be. Your spouse loves you. I mean, they said, I do in front of a huge crowd, and they wrote it down on paper. They're married to you. They love you. And I found that when I accepted that idea, the judgment of charity, that when my wife would say something that would irk me or would frustrate me, I would think, okay, hold on. I can't assume here that my wife is trying to attack me or my integrity or my pride. She is a woman who loves me. And it was kind of just a mental check for me. It was kind of just to remember the fact that my wife loves me. What's really going on here? And the other key principle that I learned from our fights really was that I need to stop waiting to talk is what I would say. And I would, instead of waiting to talk, I needed to listen to her. Because you see, whenever we would fight, I would wait until she would be done, and then I would immediately start talking. And that is a clear sign that I was not listening. I was only listening to what she had to say because I wanted to say my piece, and I wanted to say exactly what I thought.
Yeah, you were waiting in the background to just wait for her to finish her punch, and then you just attack it right away.
Yeah, and sometimes it wasn't even attacking. It was just me wanting to say my thoughts because I think I'm right. I'm a lot better listener now. And sometimes that's all she really needs me to do is just listen rather than spew out how to solve a problem, right? I mean, Marcus, you're a guy. When our beautiful wives come to us with a problem, we're like, ABC, okay, you're done.
Yeah.
Follow those steps and we're good to go. And that's, man, they don't want that.
Yeah, I learned that pretty quickly.
Yeah. At least that's been my experience. But yeah, so those would be some challenges I've had and the lessons that I've learned.
While you're talking about the challenges, you talked about you guys having some fights here and there. Do you want to share one fight or any fight that you guys had that you think really helped you guys to be able to resolve it using the two methods that you shared with us today?
You know, honestly, I have a hard time remembering the fights, but there's one fight in particular it was probably the first 2 or 3 months of our marriage where I don't remember what I did. Maybe Megan does, but I got her so mad that she actually got up out of our bed and went to our couch, which was literally like 10 feet from our bed because we lived in a really, really small apartment. And I remember thinking like, wait, isn't it the guy who's supposed to sleep on the couch?
Yeah.
And luckily I swallowed my pride and I went out there and I apologized and I brought her back to bed. But man, I wish my wife was here so that she could tell me how I messed up. This would be a totally different interview if my wife was here because she would be able to just spew out all the stupid stuff I've done.
Yeah. So during that first year that you guys were having these struggles and these moments, did you guys encounter any difficult time in that first year that you think was really impactful or really impacted your marriage?
Honestly, a big struggle we had was before our marriage. Her side of the family really fought with her and me about our marriage, or our wedding specifically, the date. I've never punched a wall before. I never in my life, but I punched the side of my house because they were trying to manipulate my wife into choosing a different date for our wedding. And I remember her crying, man, and I've never been so mad in my life. That was a huge struggle because their side of the family wanted us to have our wedding during the summer, and they wanted it at this location, and they wanted this, they wanted that. And it was very frustrating for my wife because she's not one really to stand up for herself or what she wants. She's very go with the flow and kind of a people pleaser. And so saying that she wanted it on a certain date was a really big step for her. And her family was kind of stepping all over her in that process. It was very, very difficult for me to support her because, technically at that time, I wasn't her husband. And so I kind of put my foot down in some areas and I said, look, we want to get married on this date. And I understand you have your wishes, but this is not your wedding. And I understand that, I don't want to step on your toes, but this is what we want. It was very difficult for me to be respectful during that time. But I mean, we've come out of it. We have a pretty good relationship with our in-laws. So we're alive and we're healthy and happy.
Yeah. So with that experience that you just shared with us, what steps did you actually take to help Megan resolve that issue with her parents?
A part of it was talking about it with her and talking about how we were going to do it, what we were going to do, how we wanted to do it in a way that would cause the least amount of drama. I would have to say, in comparison to my family versus hers, like there's no drama in my family. Everyone, if someone's got a problem in our family, we just say it to the other person and somehow get it fixed. That doesn't happen as much on her side. It's a little bit more drama related, and we had to work with that. A part of it was just having open communication with them and not playing and really not listening to the manipulation that was kind of going on, kind of ignoring it. It was very difficult. It wasn't difficult for me because I just forgot about it or I moved on with my life. For Megan, it definitely was more difficult at that time because, she was really used to kind of having her mom just telling her what to do on certain things. So actually it was a really big stepping stone for my wife because she really came kind of into her own person with how she wanted to do things and make her own decisions. And now she's a completely different girl. She's very strong-willed about certain things, and I'm actually kind of proud of her.
From listening to you guys, your story, it looks like you were the perfect match in terms of she helped you become more humble, and you also helped her to be able to stand up for herself and stand up for things that she wants to do so that she doesn't do things just to please someone else.
I like to think that. If she were here, she may have something different to say. But
Wow. Now, with your first year, I know with a lot of married couples, when they sit down to talk about that first year, it's one of those special moments that they look back and share a laugh or that brings smiles onto their faces. What do you think would be one highlight or one experience that you guys liked so much that when you sit back to talk about that first year, it always brings smiles to your face?
We had this huge apartment during our internship, and my wife is a different girl. She likes video games. But here's the thing. She doesn't really like to play them, but she likes to watch them and the story in them. And that's like video game boy crack right there. Okay, a hot girl who likes video games, but not really likes them to play them, but just wants to watch them. Oh my gosh. You know, my friends will tell me like, dude, you got the jackpot. And I say, yeah, I know. And you know what? We still play video games to this day, but in that apartment, I remember we just had a really awesome time because we would talk and we would play this game and we would talk about the game and we would just sit and laugh and have an awesome time together. I mean, I remember there's this game called Dead Space, and it's like this horror game where you're in space and you're fighting aliens, and maybe that totally turns you off. And no problem, no worries. But for me and Megan, we would during the weeknights, we would stay up until like 11:30, 10, 12 on a weekday, and we would play this game. It would be on the edge of our seats screaming because, you know, aliens are popping out, scaring the crap out of us. And like, that was such a good time that we had together. And yeah, I know you could say, Alex, come on, man, what are you doing playing a video game with your wife? That's not bonding. That's not bonding time. But that in my mind is a sweet time that we got to have together, where it was just me and her having a great time playing a video game and just living life together. That is a sweet time. And another thing that we got to do too is we actually started to go on walks, which we'd never really done before. And that habit has been extremely helpful for our marriage, because as I have kind of progressed, I've been a person who's really accomplishment oriented, and I'm always thinking about the next thing. And going on our walks now has really developed our relationship and to a whole new level, because we're able to talk about things openly. We're able to share our dreams, our passions, what we're excited about. And we get to find out what makes us tick and how the day really went and what we're thinking about. And if that's something you don't do, I would highly encourage you to just go on a walk with your spouse and get up off the couch, get away from the video games if you play them, and just spend that time with your wife or your husband and just talk about what the future holds. Because that's what we do. We talk about what excites us about the future. And it gets us excited thinking about what possibilities are out there for us. So those were two things that really I enjoyed about our marriage in the first year.
Yeah, that's really amazing that you talk about working with your spouse, because we also work together almost every day. Sometimes it's 3 times out of the week, with me included, but most of the time it's Ashley and the kids going for our walks. And whenever I join, it's fun because there is no cell phones. It's just us and the kids just holding hands and watching the kids jump around along the road, and then us talking together about the futures. And I'm glad you guys also do that. And if anybody's listening to us who hasn't tried that before, it's a really wonderful and unique experience to just go for a walk with your spouse, holding hands, or even with the kids, and just talking about your lives in the future and what everything looks like and your dreams and what you think you can do together as a married couple.
Yeah.
So, Alex, what are some of the resources that you think has really impacted your marriage that if you were to share one or two with our listeners, it will really help them in their marriage also?
Well, this podcast for one, right? I mean, this is like probably the resource to go to. I've never heard of any podcast or platform that helps people in their first year. So obviously this, if this is your first episode, go back, listen to all the other ones.
Thank you very much for listening, Alex.
Well, yeah, brother. If there were not really a resource, but if you haven't done it yet, therapy, counseling. We haven't done it as much now as we have, but we still do this where we have check-ins. Whether I'm good, whether we're not good, we get therapy. And I had a big hang up on this. I used to think that therapy was for people who were weak-minded or people who had problems. And I think that's totally not true. I think that even if you are the happiest person on the planet, I think you should still go and talk to someone to talk about your problems, to talk about the things that you are struggling with, so that you can have a third unbiased party walk you through those things. And that I think that first starts off as marriage counseling for people who are thinking, for people who are fiancéed. Is that a verb? I don't know. But anyways, I think you should definitely do marriage counseling, but I also think that you should continue that, whether it's monthly or every so often, because, it's definitely a huge hurdle to get through marriage and to figure out those pieces. But that's when the problems actually start happening, is when you figure out your communication style. You've got sex to figure out. You have kids. Do you need those? Do you want those? How do you figure out how to raise a kid? All sorts of stuff happens in a marriage. And just because you do counseling before marriage, if you go that route, that doesn't mean that you've even got things figured out. So I would highly recommend getting a therapist, or getting just someone who's really, really wise, and talking with them in almost like a double date setting, where you talk about your problems in an open way and you get feedback. That's probably been the most valuable thing in my marriage.
I know it's one of the things that a lot of couples tend to put on the back burner, because I don't know whether it's the way we think or the way we thought to think, but it's more like if someone says I'm going to a counselor, it's more like, you have issues to deal with, things are not going on. But usually it's smarter to just go have a checkup, even if it's with a married couple that that you guys love talking to or love hanging out with. It's something that will be beneficial to your marriage.
Yeah.
So Alex, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today to share your story. But before we go today, or before we let you go, I wanted to share with us one lesson or one advice that you wish you had known before you got married.
Alcohol makes sex a little bit more fun.
I've never heard this one before.
Yeah. Do you want to share this in the bonus content? And let me, I guess, or what I should say, to caveat it, I'm not saying that you get drunk, but just having a little bit of alcohol to get things a little bit loose would have made things probably a little bit more easy for us in our marriage.
Thank you very much, Alex, for sharing this advice for us. I've heard about it before. I don't drink alcohol, but it's something that you've mentioned today, and I think I'll talk to my wife and see what she thinks about it.
Yeah, more. We can talk more.
Yeah. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or want to know more about you, maybe they have a question about pharmacy, getting into pharmacy school, or they want to know about starting an online business on the side, what would be the best way they can reach out to you?
Yeah, if you have an interest in learning how to make job-free income, and I know that may sound a little bit internet marketing speak or a little bit cheesy to you, but that's what I do at alexbarker.co or .co. I talk about how to make money in a business way and how to do it online in a way that you don't lose your marriage, you don't lose your life. You can do what I'm doing now and be making money, paying off debt, and building something that leaves a legacy behind. That's what I talk about on my website. You can sign up for the email list and get a free course from me about how to get started making job-free income. And so I would love to have you guys over there.
Thank you very much, Alex, for making these resources available for us and sharing your first year story with us. I know there are things that you've mentioned about today that our listeners have not heard about before. I personally haven't heard about before, especially with the alcohol. But it's something that I appreciate you coming on to share with us, and I'm really grateful that you came on the show today.
Yeah, and we'll see you in the bonus content, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the First Year Marriage Show. To submit a question, feedback, or suggestions for the podcast, visit firstyearmarriage.com/feedback. Apply what you've learned today and build a strong foundation for the happy, healthy, and lasting marriage you desire. Enjoy your marriage. Enjoy your life.